For a time near the end, man became scarier than monsters. For a time I even forgot the monsters altogether. Humanity horrified me far more than the things that I could not see. And it killed me. I've reached such terrible, horrible lows recently. I returned to the wood, my sanctuary, my epitome, the keeper of what the Creator made me. Now I am yet again face to face with the creatures of myth and fable. The day is gunmetal. My heart bleeds more than it preserves. My kind fades into the fog of war that rolls across this once free land. I once bled for this place, for the ideals that it held. I once was ready to die for this place that my children would inherit. Now I know they have tricked me as the Fae of the Wood have once tricked me. They have shown me visions of a thing that does not exist, that was never intended to exist. They have weaved baskets that cannot hold their liquid promises. They have corrupted me and made me into a worse form. I am now an enigma when once I was a bastion of power and undefeatable righteous rage. They have challenged my God, so they have challenged me, not to honorable combat, but to survive in a concrete jungle where the beasts are lies and codes, and men with blood in their teeth and corpses draped over their shoulders. They've let the Dark Ones crawl up from the underworld to feast upon the young, and they call it progress. This is a war not worth fighting. Time will tell if it is a war worth surviving. My family has fled the wasteland into the zone of evergreen conspiracy. It's here we will carve our name into the cornerstone. These lands are not without their risks. Feelingless animal kind bent on survival roam here. This is how we are similar, and this makes survival feel fair once again. The playing field is leveled at last, light years deep into the abyss of flora and fauna. You don't truly grasp the intention of the forest until you've ventured forth and taken up rest in it long enough to notice the sound of your own heartbeat. Genesis. The first sounds. They are explainable, perhaps. Was that your own footfall that simply echoed to the point of unrecognizability? The snap of a fallen twig, the whistling of the wind that forms into the howl of a force of nature, the owl watching from a distance and only occasionally speaking wisdom. It's easy to say the traces of sound you hear are nothing but deer, forest fowl, or some other small four-legged entity in the underbrush, a raccoon, a possum, a squirrel. When darkness falls, however, even the most familiar sounds you begin to question. As the abyss closes in around you, limiting your perspective and suffocating your field of view, the fire burns low, seeming to require more and more attention. It burns out faster than it seems that it should. Your lantern glow struggles to paint the surroundings in understandable hues. Exposure reverses. It is now from the outside in. The base of my spine tingles in these moments, as it does before a blade pierces my body from an unseen assailant. In the forest, something is always watching. You are never truly alone. Your instinct to prepare for the defense of your camp and your life is more than a simple precaution. It is a warning and an encouragement to do so. And that's when people around here say that he notices you. They call him the Pine Giant, though that name's a modern concession. The Ojibwe people have older words for him. In some stories, Bagwajinini, the man of the trees. In other stories, he isn't just a water panther, but a land guardian as well. Some refuse to give him a name at all, and I can respect that. Because this isn't your pop culture Bigfoot. This is not a mascot on a trucker hat. This isn't a blurry roadside sighting on your way to the Dells. This is something much older. Much older. Something that does not run when you see it, because it was never hiding in the first place. It was simply you who did not notice him. Back in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, Price County, right where Lake of the Pines sits now, was one of the biggest logging regions in Wisconsin. Entire forests were cut, floated downriver on rafts of pine. Camps operated deep in the wilderness, and this was often weeks from town, cut off through winter, which is particularly brutal in this part of the country. Men in those camps worked insane hours, 12, sometimes 14-hour days, sawing timber and dragging sleds through frozen mud, and at night they would sit around potbelly stoves in bunkhouses, telling stories. This was when the forests were ancient, when they had always existed, before regrowth. Some of those stories that they told in those times got written down. Not many, but a select few. A paraphrased note from a lumberman's diary dated 1898, found years later by a historical society volunteer, said, "There is a big one in these woods, and it's not a bear. Bears do not walk like that. I saw him watching from the ridge this morning. He did not flee. He stood like he was measuring me, and I felt like a small boy before my father after breaking some rule that I did not know existed." Another entry from 1903, reprinted in a now-lost local paper, reads, "Something threw a log across the trail during night watch. Too big for any man here to lift alone. But no tracks in the mud. Only flat-pressed moss, like someone laid the earth down carefully after stepping." And then, 1912, Ogima Camp. This one's been repeated enough times that everybody's got a slightly different version, but the bones of it stay the same. 3 men quit mid-season and refused to sleep in the bunkhouse another night, claiming they woke before sunrise to see some kind of giant thing covered in bark-colored hair, carrying a cedar trunk over its shoulder as if it were nothing. They said it didn't glance their way, it didn't roar, it didn't even acknowledge them. It just walked through their camp like a man walking home after a long day. After all, they were in his yard, not the other way around. They packed their things and walked 20 miles through snow to the nearest town. And they didn't see any fists, any screams, just presence. Now, fast forward a century, you'd think in an age of cell phones and high-powered rifles, we would be braver, or at least able to capture definitive proof of this thing, right? But it isn't that way. Hunters on local forums write anonymously to avoid mockery. People are afraid to believe in such tales, but when they do become bold enough to speak, the stories line up almost perfectly with those 1900s accounts. Shadow pacing them through the trees, footsteps that only follow but never approach, breathy exhalations like a man sighing. But the strangest and most consistent detail is what I call the escort pattern. People claim that the pine giant herds rather than hunts. One man from Fairfield said that he was tracking deer when rocks began landing at his feet. But they weren't thrown to injure, they were just sort of thrown with a force, like when in those old westerns they say to dance and then they begin to shoot at the ground. Every time he turned deeper into the ridge, another rock rolled in front of him. When he backed off, the rock stopped. Another hunter claimed he saw the pine giant's handprint in mud beside his own boot print, and the palm was as wide as a dinner plate. But of course he didn't wait to meet the owner of said handprint. And then there's the infamous match step. And this is entirely uneasy, if you ask me. A woman hiking alone reported feeling as if her footsteps were literally being mirrored half a beat behind, not syncing with her cadence but correcting it. The moment she turned around, silence. When she resumed walking, the mirror walk resumed. She eventually spoke aloud, "I'm leaving now," firmly believing that she was not among mankind, and the footsteps stopped entirely. So, what walks these woods? What do you think? Is it a rare ape? Some kind of feral human? Is it a clan of survivalists that have escaped civilization and taken up shop in the deep woods? Maybe. That's literally always the scientist's guess. We just haven't cataloged what it is yet. But animals don't escort you politely down trails. They don't toss warnings instead of attacks. They don't let you go. But something with authority does, and something with order does. Something that recognizes trespass for what it is, and then corrects it. In spiritual traditions, there are beings tasked with guarding sacred boundaries. And they're not known as executioners, they're known as stewards. They're known as watchers. In some stories, these are quite literally fallen angels. In others, old gods demoted to forestry duty. In others, giants left behind when man forgot how to fear them. The Nephilim. I don't claim to know which one fits here, but I do know that everyone who has met the Pine Giant agrees on one thing. It doesn't care if you believe in it. It only cares how you behave in its woods. If the Pine Giant is some sort of quiet warden of the forest, who's stern and steady, then the Pine Devil is the one that makes even lifelong hunters rethink how brave they really are. Down in southern Wisconsin, most people have heard of the Beast of Bray Road, a wolf-like humanoid sighted around Elkhorn in the 1990s. That story made tabloids, books, and TV shows. It's famous, and in my opinion, if you actually read the accounts, it gets more and more unbelievable the more you research it. Even just not that long ago, the people I once called friends believed that they could summon this thing with special songs. But up here, if you're from here, deep in Price, Sawyer, and Rusk counties, the northern version has a reputation all of its own. A lot of folks won't even call it Dogman. They say Pine Devil because dog sounds too tame for what this is. Before white settlers even arrived, the Ojibwe already had stories of these beings called wolf warriors. Beings who walked upright, but not because they evolved that way, it was because they chose to. And these wolf warriors weren't always antagonistic. Sometimes they were guardians of specific hunting grounds. Sometimes they punished greed in a strange type of way, and some stories say they only appeared to people alone, never groups, because their purpose was personal correction, not some kind of spectacle, not to cause a scene. So just like the Pine Giant, you don't really see them with people. You see them when you're being watched. This idea of upright wolves is, of course, not unique to Wisconsin or even Northern America. Ancient Greek writers like Herodotus recorded tribes called the Cynocephali, literally meaning dog-headed men living in far-off lands. Medieval Christian texts told of St. Christopher being one of these dog beings in some early depictions. Oddly enough, early settlers in this region carried those myths in their own language, even if they didn't really admit it. There's a reason the word werewolf came so easily to their lips when they saw something standing too tall to be a wolf, but too lean to be a bear. Wisconsin's wilderness simply supplied terrain fitting for it. Endless pines, deep snow, quiet enough to hear your thoughts, and still enough for something to hear you. I recently asked somebody if they think dogmen still exist, and they said no. And I said, well, why not? There are so many stories of dogmen. And they said, well, I think he used to exist, and we have killed off many of them. And so I guess if any do exist, they are simply very rare and very deep in the wood. Dogman, being one of the most popular cryptids right now, of course, has many varying tales with strange details, and it's very hard to discourage believing in a dogman of some sort, in my opinion. The first modern reports from this dog devil creature come from the 1960s and 70s, before everything became a TV show or a YouTube thumbnail. And again, I said these are the first modern reports. The ancient native tales, of course, are not in this category. A retired deputy from Sawyer County, who's unnamed in public but quoted secondhand in local tavern chatter, and this is pretty common for ex-government workers, he reportedly said that he once answered a call from a farmer who swore that a tall, shaggy thing was walking the fence line on 2 legs. The officer arrived just in time to see it, allegedly, vault a 6-foot fence without using its hands at all. He decided that he must not have seen what he actually saw. So unlike the pine giant, I guess, which seems to move with slow, deliberate presence, the pine devil does appear to be fast and agile. One snowmobiler, which is a common activity out here, wrote on a northern Wisconsin forum in 2004 that he saw 2 yellow lights coming toward the trail, and he thought it was another sled. But then it broke off on the side, upright, tall, thin. Then it dropped down, and it ran on all 4s faster than his snowmobile. He didn't chase it. Who would? He instead chose to go home. Others report howls that literally shake your chest, but not in the same way that wolves do, because wolves harmonize. But this thing roars solo. It's a singular, commanding tone. And one deer hunter described watching a shape cross an old logging road at 7 feet tall, shoulders forward, arms hanging long like a man wearing a wolf skin. And it froze when it saw him, but instead of running away, it simply turned and walked down the road like it owned the right-of-way. Here's what's most striking. There's nobody who reports being chased by this thing. There's nobody who reports it killing. There's nobody who reports it charging them. The pine devil doesn't appear to hunt people. It simply assesses them. It shows itself. It lets you see exactly what you're dealing with. And then it performs the most devastating act of dominance, the most uneasy thing, in my opinion, that a cryptid can do. It ignores you. There's a kind of fear that, in my opinion, is worse than being targeted by a cryptid. It's being completely dismissed by it. An animal will fear you. It may even try to attack you because it's afraid of you. And then you can simply be more dangerous and scare it off. This is the case with many animals, whether wolves, bears, or anything else you might come across. It's pretty hard to argue with a 45-70 being shot in the general direction. A demon may tempt you. A predator may stalk you. But a being that doesn't even consider you worth its time and just wants to watch you? Well, what does that make you? Just some kind of entertainment to observe? Some kind of lower species to monitor? So what is it? Animal? Mutant? Some kind of relic species? Another form of Nephilim? One of the ancient fallen angel creatures, creations of forbidden tech or forbidden magic? Or, as some spiritual traditions suggest, is it simply an old office, if you will, an old profession still being carried out by a very specific type of being that we just don't know anything about, that isn't necessarily written down? Is it a sentinel, one whose job is not to kill, but to remind us. To remind humans that running a chainsaw does not make you some kind of apex, that owning a rifle does not make you some kind of king or colonizer, that out here, in the deep dark, under the pines, human confidence is just one more flavor of meat. But meat that isn't necessarily worth the mess or the struggle, perhaps. And so you're spared, not because you're safe, but because you are essentially beneath notice. You're just really not that important. Not as important as the task that it was given to perform. Now, some beings test your fear, others test your pride. I've experienced both in the woods, personally. But what about the ones that you truly need to worry about? What about the ones that test your loneliness? Around the Lake of the Pines and stretching through the old Ojibwe territories of northern Wisconsin, there are stories of beings who do not stalk from the tree line or parade down logging roads. And they don't roar, they don't charge, they don't appear at all. They just simply wait, and they call your name. Locals don't agree on what to call them. Some avoid naming them entirely. But the pattern shows up again and again, and I've begun to call them the Hollow Ones. Because unlike the Pine Giant, which is strength, or the Pine Devil, which is dominance, these Hollow Ones are absence. They are not presence. They are void. To understand them, you have to understand how many people used to die alone out here. Before heated cabins and GPS and headlamps and 911 to satellite phones, the Northwoods was a place where getting turned around in a snowstorm wasn't just an inconvenience, it was quite literally a death sentence. The Ojibwe recorded seasons not in the Roman months we're used to, but in conditions. January was Manidu Gizisuns, Little Spirit Moon. And when the barrier between worlds thinned. February was Mkwa Gizis, which means bear moon, when food ran low and even sleeping beasts stirred with hunger. Jesuit missionaries in the 16 and 1700s documented, oftentimes fearfully, these cases of what they called Wendigo psychosis. And you've heard me talk extensively about the Wendigo on this show, and I believe that I've had my own experience with one. You can find that in episode 1 of this show. It is essentially what kicked 21 CD off. Now, these Jesuit missionaries wrote of men who, driven by starvation, would go into trances, claiming that they were becoming devourers of flesh, cannibals. And whether those were real possessions or human breakdowns, it depends on who you ask. But Wendigo psychosis is a literal medical term now. And the belief wasn't that cannibalism summoned the spirit. It was the spirit itself that was hunger. And hunger wanted a body. It was a demon. Fast forward to now, when people have better gears, GPS, modern rations, AR-10s. Campers still report waking in the dead of night to hear their own names spoken from outside their tent, or a scream deep in the woods. And sometimes the voice is not shouted, it's not repeated, it's just softly stated, like a friend returning to your camp after going to the bathroom. One bow hunter who was interviewed, and I'm paraphrasing from an outdoor forum in 2011, he wrote, "I heard my dad's voice, clear as day. Ricky, just once. But my dad's been dead 6 years. My whole body went warm and cold at the same time. I didn't unzip the tent. I just whispered, 'Go away.' And it did." Another man, staying in an ice shanty on a frozen lake, said that he heard knuckles rapping on the plywood wall of his shanty, followed by a woman's voice asking if he was awake. Of course, he did not answer. He said that he felt that if he did, something would probably enter, not physically, but he felt as if it would come through him. So why the name? Across countless traditions, from Christianity to indigenous belief to demonology, all things we study on 21CD, there is a rule. You can't be taken unless you answer. Some spirits break doors down, sure. Others emanate through you. Still others are even more patient. They solicit permission. That's why the hollow ones don't drag you from your tent. They try to make you step out willingly. And that's why they are more human than beast, because they don't want flesh, they want agreement. They want consent and recognition, even if it kills you in the end. Skeptics say it's hypnagogic hallucination, right? The brain inventing voices during sleep transitions. Sure, that happens, but it doesn't explain why people hear familiar voices, why they hear dead relatives, why they hear their exact name instead of just random noises or things that are unexplainable, why so many people in the same region report the same cadence, single call, never repeated. Hallucinations kind of ramble, right? But spirits appear to announce. So what are they? Are they truly spirits of those who maybe survived and then died, starved to death in the woods? Maybe. Or perhaps harsher. Are they echoes of human need itself, given form, given patience? Not necessarily evil, but not righteous either. Some kind of parallel to the dead that may roam in purgatory, if you believe in such a place as that. They're just hollow, and hollowness hungers for structure. A voice, a body, a name, and we see this type of stuff in the Bible as well. The demons who overtook the pigs, and we could go on that. The woods get most of the attention, for sure. But up here, the water remembers just as much as the trees. Lake of the Pines, like most lakes in Price County and Sawyer County, isn't just some scenic vacation spot where fishermen can go fishing and attempt to catch muskie or largemouth bass. It's what geologists call a glacial kettle lake, carved out thousands of years ago by retreating ice, filled by meltwater, fed by creeks, surrounded by swamps, and there's a lot of reeds and cattails out here. Long before cabins and fishing docks, these were logging passageways, as we've said. These highways were made of water, and before that, they were spiritual crossings. The Ojibwe believed that certain lakes served as mirrors between worlds, and there would be ritualistic battles fought here for the purpose of pleasing gods. Still, some of these beings surface above. There's a still surface above, and a sort of deep silence below. In their teachings, drowning was not just death. It was transition without clarity, a soul stuck between breaths. So when modern campers and fishermen report hearing paddles dipping when no boats are out, or voices quietly conversing across the water, they aren't surprised, because to them, the lake isn't empty. It is crowded. We just can't see what's in it. From about 1885 to 1920, Wisconsin's Northwoods were among the busiest logging regions in America. Logs were floated down the rivers like the Flambeau, jumped between lakes, and guided by men on crude rafts. And these men weren't wearing life jackets. There was no OSHA. They weren't trained sailors. They were farm boys, handed pike poles and told, walk on timber like it's ground. Many fell, and many drowned. And they didn't fall into warm water. This isn't Miami. They fell into freezing October currents wearing wool and leather. If you fell wrong, a log could knock you unconscious. If you slipped under the raft, you'd be dragged beneath a mesh of wood so thick that no hand could reach you. These were massive trees, the likes of which we don't really see much of these days because so much of our old growth has been cut down. There are newspaper blurbs, rarely more than a couple lines, like young man, foreign born, drowned after falling from drive raft, name unknown. And you can see these unmarked graves all over the place. Or another one, 2 missing on Little Pines Portage, believed to be taken downstream. That's quite literally how quickly people disappeared. Dead by noon, forgotten by sundown. So what do people see now? Not full apparitions, not dramatic hauntings, just little bits and pieces of what remains. A muskie angler claimed that he was out before dawn when he saw a rowboat silently crossing through fog, but when he grabbed his binoculars, there were no oars, no motor, and no ripple behind it. An ice fisherman reported hearing footsteps across the frozen surface, like someone was dragging a sled or something, but the lake was empty for miles. A nurse who camps here every summer swears she heard 2 men talking just offshore while she read by her fire. Quiet, conversational tones, but when she shined a light, the voices stopped mid-sentence. Many of these stories I source from the local taverns and inns that are few and far in between up here, but often filled with the people who originally inhabited this place, members of the old tribes, old hunters and trappers, bikers, those types. But nobody claims that these are threats. They're just company, presence, company that keeps its distance. This idea, again, you can attribute to many places other than Wisconsin, which validates it. In Norse legend, drowned sailors became draugr, animated corpses rowing ghost ships. In Irish folklore, phantom boats were called cloistabodhar, death coaches crossing water. In Japan, tsunami victims are said to knock on doors at night, asking for warmth because they still believe they're alive. The theme always appears to be the same: water takes you. And if you hear voices across still water, I wouldn't recommend answering them because they might not know they're gone. And if you respond, they might think you're supposed to go with them. The life is in the blood.